Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Trent Emanecker. I am the lead at DIU for Project GI, with a couple other folks on our team helping out. But today, the intent of this is to field questions, to answer them, to try and provide a little bit more clarity around things that may be unclear to industry. So before we get into that, I want to just draw your attention to a few things. This solicitation is going to remain open until December the 31st of this year. In that time period, as described in the solicitation we released, there are going to be 3 separate design reference missions. Each one of those missions is targeting partnership with a specific Department of Defense end user or unit. And within those units, the end users are going to be the ones providing feedback and operational evaluation of submissions. As we go over the next six and a half months of Project GI, I encourage you to refer back to the FAQs, and I encourage you to see, any changes that may come, because the reality is on today's battlefield, what the situation is today is not what the situation is going to be in 3 weeks or 2 weeks or 3 months. And we launched this prize challenge with the long period so that we can adapt and react to the changing environment around us. We do so that we can better support the warfighter and take advantage of the updates and iterative capabilities that the commercial market has to provide solutions to the problem sets end users have. The primary way that we're going to update that is you go to our FAQs. There, as questions come in, we answer them. You'll see there's, I think, 16, 17 different questions that have already been answered on the FAQs. Also, we will clarify or refine or further evaluate what the DRMs are as we get closer and talk to the units, see how their problem sets are changing. And the reality is DRMs 2 and 3 are going to change more than DRM 1, and DRM 3, is probably going to tweak more than DRM 2 just because it's a longer time frame. So within that, the core remains we need solutions to the problems warfighters have, specifically in the uncrewed system space. And again, I'm going to refer you back to the solicitation. The language in there is what we're looking for. If I say something today, and I will do my best not to, but if I say something that accidentally contradicts language that's in there, the solicitation language is what we are going to use to evaluate. That's what we want. That's what we need. And so with that, I know there's a window for questions that you can submit. I'm going to go ahead and start. But really, the first thing I want to do is refer everyone to our FAQ list. On DIU's solicitation page, where we talk about Project GI, as you scroll to the bottom, that's where you can see some commonly asked questions along with the answers that we've given for them. And so from there, I'll jump in. Question number 1, how do we pick these DRMs? What are they intended to do? Well, as we look at battlefields around the world today, and it's Ukraine, but it's also Syria and Gaza and Myanmar and Armenia and Azerbaijan a couple of years ago, we see that the way that we're fighting wars is evolving. We need new capabilities to address those emerging problem sets. And so that's why we are partnered with different units to address their unique problem sets. It's intended to broadly be representative across the total force, but different units have different problems. And there are things as simple as a unit that's located in, let's just say, Hawaii, has a different problem set than one that's located in Arizona, in the high desert there. The geography is different. The environmentals are different. Someone who's focused on the European theater, EUCOM, is going to have a different set of problems than someone focused on the Indo-Pacific or Indo-PACOM. And so that's why we partner with different units to address their specific responsibilities. Now, again, within this, there's lots of overlap. An uncrewed system is an uncrewed system. A drone can fly in one environment, a drone can fly in another environment, but there are going to be differences, and that's what we're trying to tease out as we describe the DRMs. Again, very simply, many of you may have seen a traditional requirements document or talked to folks, program offices, services with a very traditional mindset. We tried to keep our description of the challenges end users faced brief and succinct. That's what DIU does when we run projects like this. But we also find that by being brief, we describe the warfighter problems, and we do so accurately. But then we allow commercial industry to provide solutions that actually solve the problem, but aren't just delivering what we tell industry that we have to have. So again, those are two very different things. And I want to make clear, we are focused on finding solutions, not on telling industry what they have to give us. There was a question around denied environments. And so there, I'm just going to refer you to the solicitation. We talk about DDIL environments. That is what we are looking for. Things that can operate in those environments and deal with it capably so. There's a question around, can US, non-US companies participate in the event? Yes. Now, the caveat is as long as those companies are not what we call covered countries. So you can look that up. There's a list of countries around the world that are going to be prohibited from participating. If you are located in there, have an ownership stake in one of those countries, you're not going to be allowed to participate. But by and large, most countries in the world will be able to. There was a question around, hey, I want to know specifics on what you're looking for, size, weight, speed, things like that. But we're not going to tell you. And we're not going to tell you because the solutions that you provide are going to be different. And if we tell you, you being the generic companies, you're going to give us what we say we want, but that is almost certainly not going to be the best solution to the problem. So that's why we're trying to describe the problem to allow industry to solve that problem in the best, most efficient way possible. If you have heard of the requirements process, asking questions like that, those are things that would be answered on a requirements document, but that's not the approach that DIU is taking with this prize challenge or in general with our commercial solutions opening process. Question about the video that's called out as a requirement for submission, how to do that. We have a number of evaluators from across all the Department of Defense and government civilians, uniformed military, DIU personnel who are going to evaluate your submissions. They need to be able to access it. So understand there's concerns around, I don't want maybe some information getting out. I don't want video shared publicly. Certainly understand that, and we're sympathetic. If you want to provide a password or some sort of limited access, that's fine. However, it does need to be accessible, and it needs to be accessible easily on DoD networks throughout the entire time that your submission could be evaluated. So for example, you submit something and you want it to be evaluated for both DRM1, DRM2, DRM3. Well, that timeline stretches out through December. If you only allow access, say you're hosting a private channel through October, evaluators at the end can't see what they need. Your submission is going to be disqualified because it did not meet the requirements that we have to evaluate fairly. But again, password protection, as long as you include the password in the presentation, which when that comes to DIU, all of our presentations we treat as proprietary material. We understand companies are putting things out that is directly material to their success or failure as a going concern. We take that very, very seriously. And so we don't share that information. As long as it's in that submission, it'll be easy for the evaluator to get and to access. Potentially a link, YouTube channel. Like, I'm not going to tell you what you need to do. There's many ways you can do that. We just have to have ready access to it. Someone asked for a comprehensive checklist for what they need to do. I'm going to refer you directly back to our solicitation. As long as you address the topics for the specific DRM or DRMs that are laid out there and provide the other information that is laid out as required, you're going to have done what you need to do. But we're not going to say on slide 1, answer this, and on slide 2, answer this. That's not a DIU model. Tell us your story so that we get the information that we're asking for. That's what we're looking for. Question around the types of environments being referred to by DIL in DRMs 1 and 2. I'm going to refer again back to the solicitation. Like, DDIL is an all-encompassing term, but what at its core it's trying to get across is the modern battlefield is congested in the electromagnetic space. Period. Doesn't matter what specific part of the frequency spectrum you're talking about, whether you're talking about precise location from satellite data, it's contested. And how do you operate successfully in a DDIL environment? Many different ways that you can do that. There are many different facets or subcomponents within DDIL as well that your solutions could address. We're not asking for something that does everything all of the time. Right? Frankly, I don't think anybody has that. And if you did, it would be really, really expensive and probably not work as well as you would hope. So chunking the problem out, minimally capable solutions, cost-effective things that address that challenge set as posed by a DDL environment, that's what we're looking for. And you can think of it as applicable around a range of geographic locations, environmental conditions, target sets. Just make clear in your submission, my proposal is intended to address X. Whatever that X is, just be clear. And there's no right or wrong way as long as you are addressing the problem set described in the DRM. Couple questions around, like, again, what's the definition of an FPV, specific weights, payloads? Like, we're not going to tell you, we're not giving you requirements. We're not going to specify weights, payloads. What we want is you to say, this can solve your problem, and here's how it does that. Question around funding and the differences available in the phases 1 through 3. Phase 1, everyone applies. You don't get money just for applying. If you are selected as a winner to progress to phase 2 out of phase 1, phase 2 selectees will receive travel funding up to, not necessarily at the amount, but up to $50,000 for travel funding for them to come to the phase 2 in-person demonstration event. Winners of phase 2 who move on to phase 3 will receive an initial award of up to, and I want to emphasize up to, $500,000, with the remainder of phase 3 total funding available for one individual company up to a total of $3 million. Again, not guaranteed $3 million, but up to that amount, contingent on meeting the successive criteria that are established throughout phase 3. The intent, though, of the phases, as you move along, we're looking for iteration. We're looking for collaboration. We're looking for partnership. We want companies to embed with our warfighters, listen to their feedback, see how your thing works, doesn't work, what can be better, what can be tweaked, and give them what they need, and do so rapidly, not a year from now, not 6 months from now, but if there's an issue identified and it's a software fix, get that out as fast as possible. Now, the next question that I think I would probably get is, well, how do we get software fixes out? That's something that DIU has been working on for a while, where we are in the process of rolling out rapidly now a continuous monitoring software approach, where via best practices from the commercial industry, we've automated our verification process to see what vulnerabilities exist, what needs to be corrected and fixed. As we are doing that, we are taking the time that it takes for DIU to approve a software update from 30 days. Now we have some that we're doing in 24 to 48 hours. Our goal is to have everything approved for a software release in less than 96 hours. Not just for this event, but for anything that DIU is looking at for an authority to operate or an ATO where we are approving software for release. There was a question around what TRL level do you need to be considered for ready now? And again, I want to be clear, when we describe mission ready in the solicitation, it means just that. Can the thing that you are proposing go do the mission that we have described in our DRMs? If it can, it's mission ready. If it can't, it's not mission ready and you should not apply. Because if you apply and it's not mission ready, we're going to deny the application and mark it as not appropriate or something to that effect. If it is mission ready, then that's what we want, because we want to be able to field it, evaluate it, and iterate on it rapidly. If you have something you're like, oh man, it's close, almost, but if it's not going to be ready in time, then it's not ready and you shouldn't apply. But that's also one of the main reasons that we left our submission window open for so long. We know that if we give companies a 2-week window in a year, and that's when they have to submit if they want to be considered, you're going to submit, and I don't blame you. I would do the same thing. But by keeping the window open, you can submit when your solution is ready, not when you are forced to by some arbitrary time constraint. So I hope that makes sense. Wait until it's ready, even if that means, say, you miss the window for DRM1. Because if you submit and it's not ready and we evaluate it as such, we're not going to consider you for future DRMs because you submitted something that wasn't ready. And frankly, we have limited resources on our evaluation team. So wait until it's ready. Give us what we need when it's ready to go be operated. There was a question around what specific solutions are you looking for UAS? We want stuff that addresses the problem sets that we outlined. Now, within that, I recognize there's a lot of ambiguity, and we intentionally didn't say, I want for example, a Group 2 cargo drone or a Group 1 vertical takeoff ISR platform. We didn't say that because we don't want to be overly prescriptive and prescribe solutions. We want to describe the problems and let the commercial industry come at us with solutions to those problems. Because what we know, if we try to prescribe the solution, we're going to get substandard things because industry and capitalism in general is way smarter at delivering solutions than anybody can dictate. There was a question around the OT transition path after phase 3. Who's the sponsor? What happens? As a prize challenge, and so this is different than a normal other transaction authority that DIU does. Today, our plan is that as a prize challenge winner, we then would transition you to a prototype OTA. From that prototype OTA, we could transition directly to a production contract. The time, the sequencing, how all that works is TBD because honestly, we're still best case 4 months out from being at the point where we could look at a solution and say, yep, I like this. We being DoD, or a service or a program office could say, this solution answers my problem. I want to go into production or I want a further prototype. So the sequence, prize challenge, prototype OTA to production OTA, or potentially, depending on the services proclivities, they could go to a FAR-based acquisition process as well. DIU would almost never recommend a FAR-based acquisition process because that really contradicts the point of going fast and delivering capabilities, but the services and program offices will have that option. The question around, do we want solution to be kinetic, fully recoverable, or consider drop approaches? Yes. We want your solutions. Again, describing the problem set, think through your costing. What is the cost per effect? So as you do this, there's the difference between training, where we do want to reuse platforms in general as much as we can, and combat. Training, the more uses we get, the lower our cost per effect. As long as the training is efficient and effective, that's a really good thing. In combat, generally, for kinetic effects, we can think of something launches and it doesn't come back. What's different is if it's an ISR platform, a cargo platform, there's a very big difference between things that are intended to be reused and things that aren't. But the overall cost is what we look at. If we can estimate we're going to get 100 uses out of something, and that's a fair and valid estimate, for one submission, another submission is only 10 uses. Well, you can do the math. The 100 uses one is going to have its cost divided by 100 to get a cost per effect. The 10 use one is going to get its cost divided by 10 to deliver a cost per effect. And I realize there's a lot of assumptions there. This is not intended to have folks say, well, we can use ours for 1,000 times so that you drive your cost per effect down. Not what we're trying to get at, but I'm trying to describe the model and the thinking that we want to get to, where low cost volume, attritable mass is something that we can deliver to the end user. There's a question around, what are we going to get for feedback? At the end of phase 1, we're going to provide general industry feedback on these were the common trends that made things successful or unsuccessful. So again, aggregating across industry, what we saw that made things good, competitive to move to phase two or not. What I can tell you is some of the things that are going to make you not competitive. It's not mission ready. It's an idea. You're looking for us to tell you what needs to be done, or it's really kind of a half-baked still idea, pie in the sky kind of thing. Things that are going to, and number five, you don't address the things we call it in our criteria. So if you don't provide a video, if you don't answer how your submission is aligned to DRM2, for example, that will make you unsuccessful. And what the team at DIU will tell you is many, many, many times we see companies just not answer things. And when you don't answer and address things that are called out in the solicitation, you're not going to move on. If it doesn't apply, or you're unsure, like, you still need to try and address it in a way, like, but things that are very clearly called out as required, you need to answer. Things that are going to make you successful, not doing all those things that I just said. Showing that you have a good team, showing that your company is viable, you have funding, you have a roadmap, the thing works, ideally in a contested environment. Those are the kind of things we want. At the end of phase two, every company that's invited to phase two will have the opportunity to get detailed one-on-one feedback for their submission. For the companies that don't move forward. For the companies that move forward, obviously, they've gotten their feedback in. Yes, the end user has evaluated you and chosen your submission to move forward. But we will have that conversation. What many people ask is, well, I was in phase one. I want detailed feedback. Today, honestly, the reality is we will get hundreds and hundreds of submissions. Unfortunately, we just don't have the bandwidth or the ability to provide individual feedback to every company. I wish we did, but we don't. And so I want to be clear that if that is going to be a prohibitive factor for you, we are going to do our very best to answer to industry the problems. If you move to phase two, we will provide in-person individualized feedback. And if you were to move to phase three and then complete phase three, but not move on to a prototype OTA or some sort of follow-on contract, we will also provide that sort of individualized feedback there as well. The question around development based in the USA, again, I'm going to refer back to, as long as you are not operating in a covered country or using parts that are not legal under the law, then development can take place anywhere in the world. Now, there's a recent executive order, and I'll refer to you, go look that up and see what it says around American-made products and things. And so obviously we are going to follow the law and the guidance that we have, but there is no blanket prohibition on where things need to take place. But I want to be clear, you should go refer to that executive order, because that is outside of the scope of this project. Obviously, it applies to the project, but not something that is specifically embedded. The question around, will uncrewed systems fall under the Blue UAS program? That is possible. As many of you know, Blue UAS has had several things rolled out recently for how we're evolving over the past month. One of which is the Recognized Assessors program. That is going to be a way for any company to go to a third-party assessor and obtain a certificate or some sort of substantiation that their submission, their component, their platform is NDA verified and in compliance with the law. So that is going to join what is called the Blue List at some point in the very near future going forward. Today's Blue UAS list is going to be known as Blue UAS Select. Blue UAS Select comes with an ATO. The Blue List, as it is going to evolve, will not have an ATO. But again, there's some language in the executive orders that make those two distinctions that you should just read the executive orders and see the implications there, because it covers ETPs and access to ranges, again, outside of the scope of Project GI, but directly related and something that we are obviously going to comply with. There is the possibility that at the request of a service, a program officer, or a combatant command, some sort of major end user, that submissions will be evaluated for an ATO, not just addition to the Blue List, but evaluated for the Blue UAS Select list and granted an ATO for authorization. Question around fixed wing considered, like, I don't care. Like it could flap, it could fly, it could take off vertically, like you could have unicorn wings. If it does the job, that's what we want. We're not dictating form, we're not dictating form factor or size or weight. We want it to do the job, which addresses the problem set that end users have. Question around DRM1. So the 3 prototypes, when are those required? So the deadline for submission is July the 10th. You need to be mission ready by that date. Fairly, for us to evaluate you, you need to be mission ready. The 3 prototypes have to be in hand for the in-person demonstration event where that DoD partner unit is going to fly and operate the thing. Excuse me. So 3 workable prototypes in hand, able to be operated by the projected window that the DRM that you're applying to is going to take place. Now, some of you are going to have prototypes that 3 is like an unreasonable number. Maybe it's only 1. Some of you, honestly, depending on the type of platform or capability, you may need 15. If that is the case, make that clear in your submission, because we're not going to disqualify you. And I'm going to compare this to a different project, but there's a project at DIU called CAMP, which launched and is now closed, but looking for large underwater uncrewed vessels. If you were to say, well, I can give you 1, but I couldn't give you 3 of those big, gigantic underwater vessels, that's going to be fine, because there's such a cost entailed with multiple platforms there that we are reasonable, because it can still meet the mission set. But if you were to say, hey, I have an FPV, but I can only give you quantity 1, that's not reasonable, because FPVs, by their very nature, you need more of them. So again, if you think that applies, just be clear in your submission what you will have available, when, and why you think that's appropriate. Can a single subsystem or technology appear on multiple team submissions across different DRMs? Yes. I think it's a given that, using radios as an example, we expect to see a lot of UAS platforms. Many of them are going to share the same radio. That's great. We encourage teaming. We encourage collaboration across companies, across industry, because the reality is no one organization is going to be the best at everything. And so we want the best for the warfighter. We think a very likely way that we get the best is when companies collaborate and specialize across a range of things and pick and choose what's best for their particular submission. There was a question around ground vehicles. So what I will do is refer you back to the language contained in our solicitation. It says uncrewed aerial systems, electronic warfare, and uncrewed ground vehicles. Those are all things contained as components or subsets of the DRMs for each of the individual units. By their very nature, on the battlefield today, UAS platforms, that's what everybody talks about. But we don't want to ignore some of those other key capability gaps that we know exist, because uncrewed ground vehicles, electronic warfare platforms, like the entire uncrewed ecosystem matters. And we don't want to ignore one piece of it at the expense of another. But the reality is, I think the vast volume, or the large majority of submissions, are going to be uncrewed aerial systems. We don't know, but that's just based off, I think, an analysis of the marketplace today. Are we looking for submissions for complete capabilities, like a UAS plus a payload, or only payloads? So again, I'm going to refer you first to the FAQs where that question is answered, but just to reiterate, specific things that can solve problems are welcome. Components, individual capabilities, software, if they are directly relevant to the DRMs associated, or to the DRMs discussed, we welcome submissions for that. We will, and certainly intend to add platforms to the Blue UAS, to add components and capabilities to the Blue UAS framework, where a radio or a sensor or a gimbal or a processor or a piece of software can be added as a distinct unit, that we absolutely do want to do. There's a question around if you submit to more than one DRM, are they separate submissions or the same? Like, that's answered very clearly in the solicitation. I'll just refer you to that. You're asking, next question is, how do we define the critical elements in DRM2? What we are not doing is defining what companies have to give us. We want solutions to the problems. Those solutions can take a variety of forms. The examples listed: full autonomy, collaborative targeting, human in the loop. Yes, we are open to solutions that solve the problems. We're not going to prescribe one over the other. Frankly, we're doing our best to be agnostic because the end user is going to evaluate all of these submissions. So I know I discussed this at the beginning, but I want to be clear. It is the actual operators from the units who are going to be reviewing the submissions, filling out the grading rubric, and then discussing what moves forward and what does not. They, and as many of you on this call know, like from your business development, they don't care what the thing can do. They just want it to do the thing they need it to do. And so I want to continue to emphasize, we don't have specific requirements for what it does. We have specific needs for problems to be solved. And there are many ways that you can solve problems. We are open to all of those ways. Question around what's a mistake your stick of firms making over and over when trying to approach DIU? So I would say there's two things. One is when companies submit to a solicitation, you have to answer and respond to the things specifically called out. Sometimes we get things that look good, but if you don't answer or describe or define what your response is to what is specifically called out, it's not a valid submission. We can't evaluate it fairly because you're missing information. So please give us all the information that you have or that we ask for in your submission. And then another mistake, and this is just general industry advice: talk to end users. I am not an end user. DIU is not the end user. Like, we try and be their voice, and we try very hard, and we certainly get feedback all the time, very direct, unfiltered, candid feedback mostly about how we're screwing up, which is great, because when we know what we do wrong, we know how we can get better. But what I would encourage every company here to do is get in touch with end users. Ask them questions. Let them tell you their problem sets. And I have talked to too many companies who've never done that. They have an idea. They have a great team. They deliver something that looks good, but they haven't ever talked to the end user. This is the Silicon Valley approach, Facebook or Google. Pick your software company. They have data on their end users. They know what they like. They know what they don't like. They do A/B testing with them. Take that model and talk to your customer. Find out what the customer wants. The customer is not me. It's not DIU. It is the end user. And far too often, we see companies just not having done that. Again, great ideas, good recognition of the problem space, but if you leave the customer out, that's a really key point. Where will phase 2 demonstrations occur? So phase 2 demonstrations are going to occur at a location hosted by that unit that we are partnered with. We will publish those locations once we're available, or once we have them. We're still refining with the units where, and you can understand the complexities around looking around deployment schedules and range availability and specific tweaks. But we will publish it. They will all be in the United States and on Department of Defense owned ranges at this point. Question around, will we provide feedback on phase 1 submissions to help teams prepare for phase 2? Like, if you're selected for phase 2, that is your feedback. We've said, yes, we like this. This is good. And then your next chance is going to be during that phase 2 demo, which is intended, and I want to also be clear on this, to partner with the end user, not intended to be adversarial. Like, yes, the reality is we're going to evaluate you, but you're evaluated in everything you do in life. We want to partner, though, where you show up, things are going to go wrong. That is a given. That's normal. It's great. Then we want to see how you react, how you learn, how things get better, how you fix it. But approach from a partnership mindset with the reality that sometimes the partnership's not going to work out. But as much as we can, we want to trust each other. And during phase 2 and during phase 3, if you move there, the end users are going to tell you exactly what they think and exactly their observations of your submission or your capability. DIU is going to help guide that discussion and reinforce it, but we are going to try and make the end users the voice of what works, what doesn't, what they think. Are there any interoperability standards that need to be considered as fundamental to being competitive? So, to the maximum extent practical, submissions need to be modular. And I recognize that's a loaded term. And I don't mean it in, the MOSA, WOSA, like not that term. Some integration is required for almost any time you stick something new on a platform, whether it's, your car or a drone or a ground vehicle. You do have to do some integration. The less integration required, the better. And that is something that we want to look at as part of our evaluation process. Using common standards, great. We want that. Things that we don't want to see, proprietary walled off solutions. If it only works with your stuff, we are not going to be interested. That's not something our partners are going to be interested in, because that's just not the future. The analogy that I use often is, no matter where you are in the world, you can get on a Wi-Fi router and it's going to work. And there are many different historical types of Wi-Fi routers. As you move from one to the next, the standards changed. Your phone, your laptop, like it has some software that allows it to integrate with that network. So there's some integration required, but everyone can get on it with a modicum of integration. And that's what we want to aim for. Question around UAS detection systems or detection networks, part of this? No, we didn't call for any counter UAS capabilities. And that really would be a subset of counter UAS. We could argue over whether it is or not, but for the purposes of what we're doing, we're going to view detection of UAS platforms as part of a counter UAS system. Question around, specifically around power charging. If it is relevant to the DRMs described and is a component that could be integrated across a wide range of platforms, something like that, yes. In general, if you have a question and you're like, man, I think this is great, it meets the criteria, it's ready, it could be fielded, we've got operational feedback, and you're just a little unsure, I would encourage you to go ahead and submit. Now, if it clearly doesn't meet the criteria that we've laid out in our solicitation, don't. But there are some things, components that I would encourage you to go ahead and submit. Question around, how do you demonstrate mission readiness when you have no DoD procurement, but lab tested prototypes not integrated or ruggedized for DoD? So that's a good question, because there's a difference, frankly, between a drone or something that can operate during the day and in good weather when it's sunny, and something that can operate at night when it's raining. There is a balance there to be struck. The submissions need to be able to operate in a reasonably expected environment. And that's both geographic, day, night, rain. It would be fine for you to say, hey, my submission only works at night, or my submission only works during the day. Those are going to be, frankly, less competitive, because we want things that just make it easier on the end user, simplify their logistics train. But the reality is, a day camera is not the same as a night camera. Different cost, different capabilities. But mission ready is also something more than I've flown it in a lab. I've been outside, I've done things that approximate a real environment or a real mission set. So again, there's a continuum. If you've only done it in a lab or a bench or your garage, that's not mission ready. If you've been out, you've flown in the rain, and you're testing it in different environments, day, night, seeing how things work, mission ready doesn't mean perfect. Perfect is not what we're going for. We want good enough to do the job. Question around what resources or support can participants expect from DIU? As you move to phase 2 and to phase 3, you're going to be partnered with those DoD and units who have developed the DRMs with us. They will be operating the platforms. They will be providing the feedback on government ranges. And you can expect the guidance that we've given to those units is we want everything from your most experienced person in the space to your brand new one, someone who knows virtually nothing, so that you get that full range of things. Because frankly, somebody who's flown a drone for 10 years, like there's stuff they would never notice or they can just do. And somebody who's flown it for 10 days is going to pick up. So we want to provide that during phase 3. So phase 2 to a limited extent, but especially for the companies picked during phase 3. We will require direct partnership and integration with our operational unit. That means your engineers are getting feedback because they're there. They are going to the field. They are seeing how it works during the day, at night, hot weather, cold weather, rain, snow, like whatever the conditions are. And the end users are going to tell them because they're literally going to be standing side by side so they can see that. Like that is one of the things that we know we have to do if we want to evolve and iterate. So we're going to do that. Question around foreign country partners. I've answered this a couple times. As long as they're not covered countries, that is fine. Asking for specific DDL conditions. We are going to simulate the modern battlefield to the very best extent that we can. That means a lot of different things in a lot of different ways, but using the Ukrainian conflict as an example, that is a fully contested DDL environment. That's the kind of environment that we know we have to replicate to test. I'm not saying that we will be able to, because frankly, the approval process and some of the capabilities are prohibitive to do in the United States, but that is the goal, and that is where we are going, and we're going to find a way to get there. Will kinetic solutions be live fire demonstrated, or is it all inert? That's a great question. The reality is it kind of depends. Some things you will be able to gain approval for much easier than others due to the different weapons and kinetic approval processes that we have. It's going to be really hard to say yes or no. The answer is it's going to depend on what your solution is. Is it something that exists already? What does it do? There was a question around, why we called for UAS, EW, and ground vehicles, because that's what our partners wanted. Certainly, the uncrewed system space is larger than just that. Surface vessels, underwater vessels, maritime. But our partners told us what they wanted, and we're not going to tell them what they want. Would a software only solution be considered? Yes, as long as it very clearly addresses something laid out in the DRM. And then we get into integration and the ability to partner and collaborate with folks. But as we've talked about, the Blue UAS framework is open to components, capabilities, things like software. We will evaluate everyone fairly to the same standard with the same rigor and the same metrics. But we'll evaluate software submissions like that for the criteria as well. The Solution brief guidance. So the pitch deck requirements are 8 slides, plus I believe it calls out one for each additional DRM. So thank you for catching that. We will update that. We're asking for slides, not for written pages, not for 15 slides. Question around things that increase the endurance or payload capacity. If you think it's relevant to the solicitation criteria, then I would encourage you to submit it. Can the same submission be used for both DRM1 and 2? Yes. You just need to note in your submission that you want to be considered for DRM1 and DRM2 and DRM3, and add a slide for each of those additional DRMs detailing the differences in your submission and how it's relevant to them, because the DRMs are different. And if you just give us a one-size-fits-all submission, that's not going to give us the clarity that we need for some of those. How many companies do we plan to down select and award for each phase? I mean, the honest answer is it's going to depend a little bit. We have no hard and fast cap. However, the reality is it's going to be somewhere likely in the neighborhood of 6 to 10 moving to phase 2, and then 1 to 3 moving to phase 3. That's just the reality of where we are and of what we're doing. Question around how we view hardware versus software solutions for GPS denied. We're just evaluating solutions. If it's software only and works, great. If it's hardware only and works, great. If it's some combination, great. We just want the thing to work. Question around, you want things that are ready now, but we also ask for companies to successfully develop. And that is correct. So the analogy I would use is we all have a cell phone. The apps on it today are ready now. You're using them, but 2 weeks from now, the same apps that you use, Google Maps, pick your social media, will have updated because the company will have continued to successfully develop and make them better. That's what we mean by to successfully develop. It's not you deliver a thing and then it never changes. That's a very traditional DoD mindset. It doesn't work today. We want you to deliver a thing and then continue to make it better. A question around frequency usage limitations. Ideally, radios are going to have a GF12 DD1494 already associated with them. Frequency limitations on ranges are real, and we will have to work through that real time depending on what the specific capabilities are. Somebody's asking about deadlines and timelines. Like, you just need to read the solicitation. It's called out there. How are different solutions evaluated against each other in the absence of more concrete evaluation criteria? We use the same evaluation criteria for every single submission. So submissions are evaluated in the same way. Now, you ask, is lower cost or longer range more valuable? Again, the answer is it depends. What's the specific solution? What's the problem? What does our end user want? There's no hard and fast answer. And I recognize from the company perspective, that's challenging because you're looking for concrete answers, because then that gives you something to go after. But what we need are solutions. And the reality is sometimes something that's cheaper is going to be better. Sometimes something that's longer range is going to be better. Sometimes something that's more expensive is going to be better. There's unfortunately just no hard and fast answer we can give. Question, if you have a technology that's mission tested, but there's a part that fulfills the solutions to the 2 DRMs you want to submit in order to scale, are you eligible? Yeah, I mean, if you have something that works today and aligns to those DRMs, submit it. Like, that is exactly what we want. We want things that work today that you can continue to make better, as I just talked about. Continue to iterate, develop, improve, but work today, yes, absolutely. Question around testing electric prototype and then changing to something after the submission date. The solution that you want evaluated during that in-person demonstration event with our evaluators, that's what it needs to be. You can't submit something then completely change it. Now, the reality is companies are going to submit things and you're going to tweak it, you're going to make it better, you're going to roll out a software update. Those are all normal improvements that we expect. But to completely change what you are proposing, then you've submitted a solution or a submission that is not what you actually intended. With that, I think I've hit most of the questions. So I want to thank everybody for their time. We will update our FAQs in response to a lot of these questions. There is also an email distribution list that you can contact the team. That's not a guarantee that we will get back to you, but refer to the FAQs first, refer to what the solicitation language says, submit your questions via that distribution list, and then if applicable, we will update the FAQ. And then if you had a specific question that we did update, I'll shoot you back an email to let you know we did that. I want to thank everybody for their time. And more importantly, thanks for caring about providing solutions to the warfighter so that they will be prepared for combat. Because at the end of the day, the entire reason we're doing this is because there's a lot of 19-year-olds wearing the uniform who don't have the things they need to train for, prevail, and survive in combat. And we want to give them those things. That's our mission. That's what we want to do. That's why we're trying this. Thanks, everyone.